All right, Boker Tov. We learned Leili Nishmat Avigdor Avram ben Rachalea Ner Tzvi Shamash Devan Aliyah. We are going to start chapter 2, Pirke Bet, first Mishnah. The author of the Mishnah, the person mentioned in the Mishnah is Rabbi. We talked about him. I'm not going to get into depth. We talked a lot about him before. He is the one, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who compiled, edited the Mishnah. Okay? So we've come to the time period of Rabbi in the Mishnah. And he says something, and I mentioned this last time. He says something that seems to be very familiar, but just a twist on the words. Let's take a look. At least no, sorry. Hi, my name is Zev. I'll be with you. Never mind. Forget that last statement. He says something that we haven't mentioned yet. Okay. What is the proper path the person should choose in life? And he says, Kol shehi tiferet lo'osa, whatever brings glory, splendor, goodness to the one who does it, v'tiferet lo min adam, and also people will look upon it as something positive. And I'd be curious to know what your English translations say for tiferet lo min adam.
That is honorable and beneficial for himself as well as for other people.
As well as for other people. Okay. Any other translation? Because there's different ways that's translated. In the sight of men. Okay, good. That's more what I was saying, which is like how people see the action that's being done by the other individual. Okay. Then if it's a good thing, then you would say that, people would look at it and say it's praiseworthy. Then that's something, says Rabbi, you should choose. Continuation. He said, be careful with a light or, quote, a simple mitzvah, like a difficult mitzvah. And we're going to obviously have to translate what this all means. Because we don't know the reward for the mitzvah. What does that mean? We don't know how Hashem weights each mitzvah, and we don't have the right to start gauging which one is more important than another. And then he says, look, if you're about to do a mitzvah and you have an opportunity to do one, or an avera, an opportunity to do one, you have to do a chishuv. You have to do a little bit of thought process. He says as follows. You should think about, look, I say, okay, so I'm not going to do mitzvah X. But what do I have to lose if I don't do the mitzvah? And you have to think about the reward you will receive for a mitzvah, for an avera, meaning the reward, meaning the punishment, as opposed to the hefsed. What do you lose out if you don't do the avera? It sounds backwards, but he's saying that take into consideration. You're really thinking about stealing that candy from the makolet. Think about it for a second. What do you have to gain by not taking it? What do you have to lose by taking it? And then look at three things. So he seems to be giving us in this Mishnah life lessons of how to really act and do mitzvot and how to approach mitzvot and stay away from averot. And then he says here, I'm going to give you a good guidance. If you keep this in mind, it'll help you. How are you going to stay away from doing an averah, a sin? Know what's above you, which are three things. Ayin ro'ah, a seeing eye, the ozen shoma'at, a listening ear, and all of your actions are written in the book. Okay, so first, we just read through the first Mishnah of chapter 2. So what he's saying here is kind of just to summarize, is that, again, this is Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, known as Rabbi. Why was he known that way? He was known as Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He was known as Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, but he's also known as Rabbi. Because, like, for example, nowadays, when you talk about the Rebbe, you're talking about the Lubavitcher Rebbe's. If you talk about the Rav in the United States, you're talking about Yosef Tov HaLevi Soloveitchik Zatzal. If you talk about whoever it might be, and they become known by that title. So he was the first one to have the title Rabbi. And besides that, it's in deference to his action, what he did by organizing and editing the Mishnah. Anyway, so he gives us some general guidance in life. He tells us what's the right path to walk. Let's say for a moment you're doing a little bit of introspection, and this pretty much this entire Mishnah is about introspection. you do a little introspection, and you want to know what is the right thing to do. You sit down one day and say, look, I'm happy with my life, but I want to do better. Or maybe I'm not so happy with how I'm doing in life, and I want to change my ways. So Rabbi Yudan, he says, okay, what do you do? How do you plan? Well, he could have just said, do the mitzvot, stay away from Averot, check, waiter can have the check, please. And that's all you needed to say. But he doesn't. He comes from the psychological perspective. This whole Mishnah is a psychological perspective. He says, first of all, look, you already know, it sounds like the beginning of Mesilat Yesharim. You already know what you're supposed to do. Ramchal said, I don't have to remind you. We all know. Like if you ask a person who's moderately Shomer Shabbat, should you keep the entire Shabbat? Or someone's not religious. Say, okay, look, I know I'm supposed to, but I don't. Should you eat kosher? In my house, I keep kosher, but eat out, I'll eat something maybe it doesn't have a hechsher on it. But if you ask them, again, unless they're anti-religious, is it something really that is the right thing? Almost always, well, yeah, it's the right thing. I don't do it. I'm not on that program. So we already know what the right thing is. So now Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, let's take a look. He says, take stock. He says, take a look. If you do something, would it bring pride to you? Would it be something you were happy you did? Doesn't say would it make you feel good. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing. There's a whole thing like, well, don't do it if it doesn't make you feel good. Do it if it makes you. There's nothing about that. It's the right thing. And not only that, if someone saw you doing it, would they be inspired by it? Would they think he's doing the right thing? You say, Shakoach, maybe I should do it. And if the answer to those questions are yes, then then you should do it. That's the first statement he makes. The second statement he makes has to do with we can't make judgment calls when it comes to mitzvot. He said that you have mitzvah kala and mitzvah chamura. I mentioned very quickly at the end of the last class. What does that mean? Mitzvah kala literally means a light or easy mitzvah, and a mitzvah chamura means a difficult mitzvah. So there are different ways of interpreting. He says you can't start making judgment calls. Well, yeah, we can. Why? Because if you have a choice, I've said this before, if you used this example 1,000 times already, if you have a choice between eating a piece of raw cauliflower that you did not check for bugs versus eating a sandwich that's made with ham and cheese, which, by the way, is not basar v'chalav because it has to be kosher meat, eat the ham and cheese because the one bug is 6 isurim and the ham is 1. So, yes, we can make judgment calls. So what's he talking about? So he's talking about the following. Or if you have a choice between should I keep Shabbat this week, not keep Shabbat, and instead of going Shabbat, maybe I'll go and visit my elderly aunt who's dying, okay, and drive to her on Shabbat. How do we make those judgment calls? This may be not a great example because in some cases you can do that. Matter of fact, just had a situation recently where somebody's mother was very, very sick, found out got a phone call on Shabbat, and ran to ask Rabbi if the guy can go and run to see his mother, because God forbid could have in the end. He says, yes, of course you can. So in any case, but what's he really saying? He's looking at it from the perspective of what? What is it? We have to first define what's a mitzvah kala, mitzvah chamura. Is it based on the easiness or difficulty of the mitzvah, of doing the mitzvah? Or is it talking about the, quote, reward and punishment of the mitzvah? So if it's the easiness and difficulty of the action, then it sounds like you can make a judgment call, because why would I not want to just do a bunch of easy things instead of on the hard? I'm not saying I would want to do this the right thing, but it sounds like naturally I would do something like that. But he also says something else, because if you look at it from the perspective of the punishment, why is it that we have Averot, and I talked about this last week on Shabbat, that we have Averot, or sins, that have some terrible punishments, whether it's death, excommunication, flogging, all kinds. When in fact, vast majority of the time, what Jews were almost never put to death by the Sanhedrin for a certain Averah. It was almost impossible. So why have it in the first place? So that people should know the severity of the Averah, of the sin. So which is it? What exactly is he talking about? What's the calculus, as they say, of this decision he's trying to say? You should not try to weigh a mitzvah kala against a mitzvah chamura. So most of the commentaries say like this, that we're talking about the mitzvah kala, the easiest mitzvah is what's called shiluach haken or shiluach hakan. What is that? You come across outside your house, not in your yard, not on your mirpeset, but you're walking down the street, and there's a nest. There are eggs, or they're little chicks, and the mother bird, not the father, the mother bird is hovering above the nest. What's the mitzvah? Shoo the mother bird away. That's the whole mitzvah. You make a bracha. Al shiluach haken. That's the whole thing. You're allowed to take the eggs if you want. Interestingly enough, I've had the question over the years. People call me. I see a bird nest. I ask them where it is, and almost always it's not in a place where you need to do it. It's almost always on their private property. It has to be baderech. It has to be somewhere out in the way. You come across it. But I did find out something very interesting, an ornithological interest. Wow, never thought I'd use that word in my whole life. Evidently, the mother birds during the day go out to work and the daddies stay home. Okay, it's usually when you see a bird hovering over the nest during the day, it's the father. There's no mitzvah then. It has to be the mother. It says, and the mother is hovering there. Now, I don't know how you're supposed to tell, and I don't want to know how. That's okay. But in case you do fulfill all the requirements, you know it's a kosher bird, and it just came across that that's a mother. All you do, the other end of the extreme I mentioned last time is kibbud avot, honoring your parents. Why is that so difficult? Answers itself, I think. But it also applies even after the parent is no longer alive. The way you refer to the parent and how you talk about them and saying alav shalom, alav shalom. There are other things you do. And it's not an easy mitzvah because you're always, especially as you get old, you think, when you're a kid, it's the easy time. That's the hard time. That's the easy time. Kibbud avot is actually easy when you're single, when you're living as a kid in your home. You may feel that way when you're a kid, but when you grow up, and you're being pulled in so many different directions. You maybe have a wife and children and maybe grandchildren. You have other responsibilities, and you're lucky enough to have two parents alive. It's difficult. Okay. But I was going to say a sentence and then I'll say, but both of them say in the Torah that your reward is a long life. Why do you get a long life for? And on the other hand, I'm making this up, obviously, breaking my back and schlepping pails of water to bring up a hill to my dad. Right? You're going to say something.
Doesn't it make more sense that you only shoo away the bird because you want the eggs? I mean, you're saying you don't have to. The reason is not that you want the eggs; you're just shooing the other way. It's not because you want the eggs.
Okay, so ask a better question. Why is there such a mitzvah? Why is there such a mitzvah? Right? So what you're doing is you want to insert logic into what's really a chok. The chok is a law that we don't understand, like paraduma. We don't understand, but Hashem has his reasons. If the whole reason was for the eggs, okay, but it doesn't say that. It says if you want them, then you can take the eggs. So obviously, it's not for the eggs. It's if you want. It has to do with shooing at the mother bird. Okay, so someone to say, because if you want the eggs, the best thing is you should shoot away the mother bird so that she shouldn't feel like angry, right, and upset and jealous. But that's only if the whole point was to take the eggs. Otherwise, there would be no. You might say, well, if you want the eggs, shoo away the mother bird. It's the opposite. If you shoo away the mother bird and you want the eggs, you can take them. So there's a Mishne that says in Masachet Brachot, if someone says modim, which means in davening, you say modim, the words twice. Mishatkinoto, you say shut up. You can't say that because it's like you're saying thank you to two different deities. Or al kan sipo yagiu rachamecha, on the may your what's it called? Your rachamim come to the bird in the nest, whether it's referring to this or not. Then you also say, what? Just on those birds, Hashem has mercy. So, because Hashem has mercy on all his creatures. So I'm saying this as I'm looking at a pigeon hovering over there. It's pretty funny because you never see pigeons around here ever. What was I saying? So you'd be right if the purpose was just to take the eggs, but it's not. There's its own mitzvah to shoo away the mother bird if the eggs are there, or the efrochim of the little chicks are there.
Why can't it be on your property?
Because it says as follows. I only know the words because it's a song I learned when I was in high school. When you happen to come across a bird, a nest, baderech, on the way, on any tree, or laharetz, or on the ground. Okay, so it's all a matter of mikre. It just happens. Prat limzuman, which means except with the exception is when they're already available. That means in theory, if there's a nest right here on the mirpeset, right, it's already caught. Yes, they fly away, but it's in a private area. It has to be public. It has to be. There's a famous picture. Who was it? Was it Rav Kook? Maybe it was Rav Kook. There's a picture. I have to go find it of Rav Kook coming across. They have to put a ladder by a little tree, and he shoots away the mother bird. I think it was Rav Kook. It's a rare mitzvah. Most I would guess 99.9% of the people never have the opportunity to do the mitzvah, but it happens. The funny thing is, when I was in Chicago, I was the rabbi officially 10 years in shul. I went 9 years and 9 months without that question. Didn't come up. And then in 1 week, 2 people asked me that question about, I have the situation, what do I do? I never got the question before. I've had it 3 or 4 times here, but you're right. But the problem again is that we're talking about a mitzvah that the logic has nothing to do with the action you're doing. It has to, because that's what Hashem wants. Okay. So we come back to the question: why is it that the same reward is for the easiest and the hardest mitzvah? For that very reason, to tell us, don't start making cheshbonot. Don't start making these decisions based on the reward you might get, because who knows that the reward for separating trumot and masrot, or the reward for helping someone across the street, is not even 10 times greater. That we don't know. So don't make decisions based on that. So that's one of the things he said. In addition to that, I want to, because I don't want to forget, it just popped in my head, I want to mention something about the end of the Mishne. The last part of the Mishne said that what's a good way, and we're going to come back to this first part, what's a good way to keep your eye on the prize? He says, keep in mind, just think about something. He says, think about that in the heavens, there's a seeing eye. We're not talking about the third eye. A seeing eye. There's a listening ear, and everything's being written down in a book. And I actually have something to share with you about that in a little while. But a story just popped in my head that I have told, but it's been years since I've told. True story. A friend of mine told me the story from the one who it happened to. So this isn't I heard. And again, maybe I've told this. You've heard this before. This goes back to the early days of video cameras, about 1980. Because I only know the year because I got married in 81, and it was just at the cusp, right before they became popular. So about 1981-ish, there was a guy's videoing a movie, a wedding, and he's standing under the chuppah, and the rabbi and the cantor are standing under the chuppah waiting for the chatan and kala, and they walk down, fine, it's over, and then they get the video. The parents get the video of the wedding. They pop it in the VCR. It's good I don't have to explain what that is. Pop it into the VCR. They start watching, and they can hear, while their daughter and future son-in-law are walking down the aisle, they can hear the rabbi and the cantor talking under the chuppah while waiting, because they're standing right next to the thing, open mic. Rabbi said, he's marrying her. She's like a little big. And the cantor said, she's not even that pretty. Right next to the video camera. And the parents are mortified. They are so mad. What they do, they called the rabbi and the cantor and said, we just got the videotape. We'd be honored if you come join us for watching it with us. Put it in the machine. Needless to say, they couldn't find a hole big enough to crawl into. They learned their lesson. They were, besides the fact that they publicly, I understand, they publicly apologized to the girl, the family. You can't undo that. But it's this Mishnah. Ayin ro'ah, ozen shomat, a seeing eye, a listening ear, and all of your actions being written down. Okay? If we all cringed when we heard that story, right? I still cringe when I tell it after I told it many, many times. And that's how he's telling us we're supposed to feel when we do something wrong, or when we're about to do something wrong. Okay, so let's continue this and go back to the beginning now. So interestingly enough, the Rambam tells us something interesting, that regarding this particular Mishnah, when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, what's the straight? Yashar means straight. What's the straight path one should choose? So based on this, the Rambam has his famous approach to life. His famous approach to life in philosophical ways, in halachic ways, in mitzvah ways, has to do with what's known as the The Shvil HaZahav literally means the golden path. What's the golden path? Down the middle. You shouldn't be too cheap. You shouldn't be just giving away your money. You shouldn't be too lazy. You shouldn't be running to do every single thing. You shouldn't be too. He does say when it comes to anger, you're allowed to be too calm. You're allowed to do that, but you shouldn't let things just completely roll off of you 100% of the time, because sometimes you have to stick up for yourselves, unless the United Nations doesn't allow you to do that. Okay, so that's what he uses this concept, derech yishara, this path. Now, I did come across a very interesting commentary, the Merkevet HaMishnah. Merkevet HaMishnah is a commentary on the Rambam. And he says as follows, that you're supposed to change the way you read this Mishnah just a little bit. He says, now, if you look in your book, it probably, if it has pisuk, it has punctuation, it probably says, Ezohi derech yishara she'yavor lo hadam, siman she'ela, or question mark. Does it? It does not. What does it have? Period? Nothing? A comma. Okay. Mine has a question mark. It has what? A comma or a question mark? Question mark. Okay, because it sounds like it's an introductory question. What is the proper path that one should choose? He says, it is an English one says like that? Okay. So here's how he says to read it. The Merkevet HaMishnah says, Ezohi derech yishara. Question mark. What is the straight path? Then he says, Sheyavor lo adam. A person is supposed to do this introspection. He's not saying this is an introduction question followed by 3 answers. He's saying this is its own question and answer to start with. What is the right path? What are you supposed to do? Sheyavor lo adam. He should sit there and think and do this introspection. He needs to make some choices in life, which I thought was an interesting take. For those of you who remember, I said this. This is not original. I even said it also under the chuppah when my daughter got married. I think this, but Eliana got married. The pasuk says, "Mi ha'isha chavetz chaim, ohev tomim, ohev yamim lirot tov." Who is the one who wants a good life, who wants to live a long time? Then what are you supposed to do? You should don't speak lashon hara. I heard a comment, and I went to the person I heard it from. He says, I have no idea where I heard it from. So he says, you can use it as your own. It's not my own. The comment said like this, that you should read it differently. Mi ha'isha chafetz chayim. Question. Who is the one who wants to live, wants life? Ohev yamim lirot tov. That you should love every day you have and see the good in every day. It's not the continuation of one long question, but he breaks it up. A similar idea we see here. So he says, again, this Merkevet HaMishnah says, Ezohi derech yishara, she'yavor lo adam. A person needs to make choices. It's not something that's so obvious, right? And then finally, there's one commentary I came across. This is one of the reasons I absolutely love teaching, is because I come across stuff I never would have come across before. There was a man named Rabbi Yoshua Heller. He lived in Vilna, and in the early 1900s wrote a commentary on Pirke Avot called Todot Yehoshua. When I came across the comment, I thought, maybe it's a little booklet. I looked online. It's like hundreds of pages. I'm making a pitch for something I've made a pitch for before, and you should know about this website if you don't. HebrewBooks.org. It has tens of thousands of Sfarim and books in English online that you scan. From the 1700s, 18, 19, 2000, everything. You find unbelievable, especially stuff that's not in print anymore. If you want to see printings of the Gemara that was from the 1700s, 1800s, it's handwritten at that point, but it's printed. It's printed, sorry. It's unbelievable. So I came across, I went to look at the Sefer. It's hundreds of pages long. Anyways, he says like this. He divides up the Mishnah into 4 categories. The first one is Ezohi derech yishara, means he's referring to the topic of lifnim mishurat hadin. For those of you who learn Daf Yomi, this was a topic just the other day. I don't learn Daf Yomi probably, but I'm aware because someone asked me a question about it. Daf Yomi was talking just the other day about the topic of lifnim mishurat hadin. What does that mean? In English, we say beyond the letter of the law. It means acting with mercy or doing more than you have to. So interestingly enough, in English, it's beyond, outside the letter. In Hebrew, it's lifnim mishurat hadin, inside the lines of the law. What does that mean? So you're supposed to keep the law. So the Gemara talks about this issue and says, what was one of the reasons? It's not the accepted opinion, but it's one of the reasons of the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. Shehemidu Tamid Chachamim al Divrei Torah. That the Talmidei Chachamim, when they made a halacha, a psak, they had a question, they went by the letter of the law. Well, why wouldn't you? Like, you don't go like, well, I think it's okay. You know, I love answers like that. It might be okay. It could be okay. Just give an answer. So what's wrong with that? Gemara says, because they lived actually by exactitude of the law, with absolutely no wiggle room. When there was room for wiggle room, they didn't do lifnim mishurat hadin. You didn't go a little bit above and beyond to find wiggle room that's still within the confines and stricture of halacha. One of the classic examples of lifnim mishurat hadin, I go down in the wadi over here, and I find a ball. This question has come up actually, but I find a ball and it has someone's name on it. Now you'd think you have to return it. It has a siman. There's a sign on it. It's got a guy's name, but technically it's not. You don't have to return it because it's already. We assume it's in a situation where the person probably gave up hope on it. Okay, unless it looks brand new. There's a judgment call. You find it under a bush. It's got dirt on it. It's obviously been there for a while. You're allowed to keep it, but should you? You know whose it is. It's your neighbor's ball. It's got the name on it. What's that? It says Sammy. Please return to Sammy if found. That's cute. So 99% of people, I would assume, will return it. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Do you have to? No. You get a mitzvah for it? Absolutely, you get two. You get the mitzvah of Hashavat Avidah, returning a lost object, and you lived by Lifnim Mishurat Hadin. You went above and beyond because you didn't have to do that. So the Toldot Yoshua is telling us that the Derech Yeshara that he's talking about is based on the pasuk of Asita Yashar Vehatov. The Torah tells us you're supposed to do that which is right and proper, that which is straight and narrow. What does that mean? Not narrow, which is straight. Again, if it was my ball out there, I'd probably want it back, even though I may have given up hope. But if someone does find it, that'd be awesome, right? So he says that's the Asita Yashar Vehatov. So in a sense, what Rabbi is telling us in this beginning of the Mishnah is to live by the idea of lifnim mishurat hadin. You know, there's strictures in halacha, but as long as I'm telling you, he says in this Mishnah about the idea of not making judgment calls, let's add one more layer, and that is that even when it's clear that you're allowed to do something, do it even better than that. Let's talk about the mitzvah kala keva chamura. Okay, he says again, v'avei zahir, you should be careful. B'mitzvah kala keva chamura. Why? Why should we be just as careful with a simple quote unquote mitzvah as a difficult mitzvah? Okay, that's good. But if we say there's another Mishnah we have that says you should not be like a servant, we saw this in the first chapter, that you shouldn't be like a servant who serves his master for a reward. You should just do it, and then Yehema Hashemayim Aleichem. So yes, you're right, but probably deeper than that. Why should I care? I might want to make those judgment calls. But one is the obvious, like you said. But let's go beyond the reward issue. Because what happens when I make judgment calls? We're not talking about, do I want to first do the laundry and then go to the makolet, or do I want to go to the makolet first do the laundry? We're not talking about that kind of stuff. We're talking about doing the word of Hashem, the mitzvah. So when I start saying, it's not as important to me today, I'll do this one, we're mizalzel b'mitzvah. We are ridicule. I guess that's the right word. I don't know how you say it in English. Mizalzel. You're ridiculing, you're cheapening the mitzvah. I guess more like cheapening. The word zol comes the same shorish, which means cheap. Zolu v'gadol. Zol v'gadol. Anyways, so that's one of the reasons that we don't want to, because again, we don't know Hashem's cheshbonot. We're not, Hashem isn't human. No, if as a teacher or as a parent, I give a couple of tasks to a child or to a student, and I say, okay, make sure you do these three things, and they want to prioritize how they're going to do them. As long as they do them, that's fine. If they decide to do this one first, this is the easy task instead of the hard task first, I don't care, as long as they do their homework or whatever it might be. It's not a matter of zilzul, but if God says, do this and this and this, you say, I'll get to that eventually, maybe I won't get to it, I just want to focus, this is a much more important mitzvah, then we're being mezalzel the mitzvah. Because it says, which is what Larry was saying before, because we don't know the reward. right? So it actually says it here, but it's even, like I say, even deeper than having to do with the reward, because the reward and punishment is a motivator, right? And again, Shari, we talked about this as well, that it's a motivator at a certain level. But when you're when you do something because it's what Hashem wants, as opposed to for the reward, it's a much deeper level. I made I made the connection between someone who works for a company. If I work for a company, I worked in not mine, but a family business for 2 different places, 14 years and 3 years. So where is there? No, more. It was 16 years and 2 years, something like that. I don't know. So it was this one family business, small-ish, about 70 employees. I liked very much what I did. I liked the owner. I liked the business. I learned a tremendous amount about humanity by working in this company. I was director of purchasing. And I gave it my all, but it's still not my family. It's not my company. He had a son-in-law and a daughter and a son who ended up coming into the business. What was the way did they do it for the paycheck? They didn't do it just for the paycheck. They do it for the long game, because eventually they were going to inherit the business, and that was going to become their business, although it was sold. But I didn't do it just for the paycheck. Obviously I did it for the paycheck. But I wanted the company to grow, because I also grew because of that, because the pension plan, it worked out nicely. We had profit sharing, which Baruch Hashem. So there's a difference in why we do mitzvah and what the motivator is. So therefore, in this calculation, it shouldn't really come into account. Yeah, let me see here. Okay. Then it says, "V'havei mechashev mitzvah mechashev hefsed mitzvah keneged schara." What does that mean? We should try to take into account the loss that we will incur by not doing a mitzvah versus the reward we would get for it. So I'm going to read to you a comment of Rashi, which just conveniently I have on my phone. Where did I find it? Rashi says as follows. The money you may now, let's back up a second before you need introductions, Rashi. There's a halacha, the Gemara talks about, let's say there's a person sitting here on the sidewalk, and their job is they're supposed to be counting widgets, or they're supposed to be stamping something, and they're being paid for the time. And their Rav walks by, they're not allowed to stand up and say Shalom Aleichem, because that little tiny bit of veering away from what they're being paid to do is considered that you just now stole, in quotes, from the owner. Okay, it's a little extreme, but it's a general concept. Now, what does he say? So we have to put that aside for a second and have to understand what that means. Here says, Rashi says, what does it mean you have to consider the loss of not doing a mitzvah relative to, or the loss of the reward by not doing the mitzvah? That which you might lose out in your business, in your having, let's say, to sell another item. That instead of selling that item, you did a mitzvah, you put on tefillin, you daven, whatever it might be. Don't worry that you lost that client for that 100 shekel, whatever it might be, for that meeting, versus having to do this mitzvah. But think about the reward you're going to get in the future. If a mitzvah comes to your hands, do it. Because even though you might lose money, because the reward for the mitzvah is great. Now, didn't I just contradict myself? I kind of contradict. I said you were not allowed. This guy's not allowed to stand up because he's stealing from his owner, from his employer, and yet he's saying, you got a mitzvah. Like, okay, so instead of I go to a meet, right, and get to the morning, I said, sorry, Daniel, the principal. I said, well, sorry, someone wants me to tie a pair of tzitzit for them right now. It's actually not a mitzvah to tie. That's a different story. Hachsher mitzvah. Okay, or someone needs me to drive them to the makolet. It's a chesed. I have an opportunity to mitzvah. Look, are you mental? What are you talking about? Oh, look at the Mishne. It doesn't work that way. We're talking about someone. They're the balabas, as they say. They're the one who's in charge. I have an opportunity. If I don't go to, let's say, put on tefillin now, God forbid should ever work that way. If I don't put on the tefillin now, then I'm not going to be able to do it the rest of the day. There's no chance to be able to do it. But right now, I have that meeting that may make me some good money. Don't worry about that money that you're going to lose by not making that meeting. Put on the tefillin, because the sachar, the ultimate reward that you get for the tefillin for that moment, is a lot bigger. It may not seem that way at the moment, but somehow you're going to get repaid, right? So that's this idea of the Havesa. Okay. Now, there's another issue, and that is take a look at when we do an aveira, we have to think in mind, take into account what have we lost versus what we have to gain by refraining. So here's what I'm going to do. I was never really good at math. So when I tell you that 18 minutes costs you 72 minutes, you have any idea what I'm talking about? 18 minutes will cost you 72. Let me explain. Let's assume we've all, especially before Waze and Google Maps, we've all been in the situation. Y'all remember what triptychs were from AAA? All right. We all went to AAA, maybe. You have any idea what I'm talking about? Triptych? MapQuest is way before MapQuest. This is you would go to AAA, and then if your car breaks down and you're Canadian in the United States, you go, we got to call the AAA. We have to call the AAA. So anyway, I don't know where that came from even. Yeah, exactly. Yellow or pink. You get this series of maps. First, you get a big map of where you want to go and lock the main roads. And then it breaks down into smaller maps, and they draw on the map a highlighter, the route you're supposed to take. Or some people say route, but they're wrong. Okay? Triptych, exactly. So we've all been down this situation where we're driving down a certain interstate and said, oh no, it's the wrong direction. Or I missed the exit. Now what? Well, he couldn't go recalculating. There was no recalculating with a triptych, right? So if you went 18 minutes the wrong way, it cost you 72 minutes. Why? There's your 18 minutes to begin with. You went the wrong way. Just to get back to zero is another 18. It's 36. To go the next 18 minutes, which is the original 18, it costs you, now you're up to 18, 36 plus 18. You can do the math. I'm not going to do it. And now when you get to the point where you would have been before, had you gone the right way, it costs you, now you're up to 72 minutes. That actually works into a halacha, by the way, which is why it says that if you're no longer full after 72 minutes, you can't bench after you ate. That's why you have to go when you, it actually, yes and no. It actually works more into the idea of washing for hamotzi. If you have to go more than 18 minutes back to be able to wash, you don't have to go. You can cover your hands, and you're not going to get any water now for a long time. So you don't have to go more than 18 minutes back because halacha says because it costs you 72 minutes for that. Did you follow the calculation? It is simple. Want me to do it again? Yeah. Right. We'll go to AAA and we'll work on it. Okay. So then, Rabbi gives us this example, this instruction of how to think about, how to be careful about, is this idea, this constant video on us. And not only is it a video, it's a video of what we're thinking, what we're seeing, what we're saying, what we're doing. And then he says, all your actions are recorded in a book. So I'm going to send something to you. Sending you a PDF. Just open it up on your phones, please. As soon as I send it, whoops, share. Pirke Avot class. If you don't mind, if you have your phone, fine. Otherwise, don't worry about it. This is something I wrote. This is, for those of you know, I had submitted one of my piyutim for a contest. I won second place. This goes back a few months. Anyways, this is the one that won, but it's not why I'm showing it to you. This is the same idea of what this end of this Mishne is. I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to read it through, and then I'm going to go back and read it with translation and explanation. Be'eref ayin omed b'shafir zevulav, pachad kishroi hashofet v'gam sheluchav. קולות וברקים ושרפים עומדים ממעל, הגיע העת לענות על כל מעל ומעל. אל מי אנוסה לעזרה ביום פקודה, ערום בזער בינתי ומלא חרדה. הספר נפתח, המכתב מכתב ידי, אוי לי מיום הדין, לכלום נחשב נדודי. בצלך תסלחוני, אני רק אנוש. עשה עמדי חסד ותמנע מי לאנוש. What does that mean in English? In an instant, it's talking about the moment after death. In an instant, I'm standing in front of the godly court, filled with fear when I see the judge and his ministering angels. Sounds and thunder and lightning, and the angel standing above, The time has come to answer for every transgression in life. It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't rhyme in English, obviously. To whom can I run for help on the day of judgment? Naked with no action, of small mind, and filled with anxiety and fear. The book is open, and the handwriting is my handwriting, which refers to the idea that says that after 120, book is given to us about all our actions in life, and we have to sign, say, yep, that was me. Woe is me on the day of judgment, for to nothing my actions are considered. In your shadow, God, cover me and protect me, because I'm only human. Please do with me a chesed and don't punish. Okay, again, it doesn't work in English the same way. That's the gentleman in Hebrew, Baruch Hashem, did. And that the idea changing back in my head with this, because that in the Gemara that talks about that when we will have to sign, oops, that was me. Imagine you're in a car accident, not you, God forbid. A person was in a car accident, and it was 100% their fault, right? So they go to court, and at the end of the judgment, what they say guilty, and then you have to pay 5,000 shekel, whatever it is. Okay, so still a little bit disjointed. You got to pay, but you have to sign a piece of paper. I did this, and I was wrong, and it makes it more personal. That's just one action. We have to sign on our whole life, okay? And that's his motivator. It's not to scare us out of our minds, but it's to make us aware. This all goes to that pasuk, Shivite Hashem benegdi tamid. This is what says that I will place God before me at all times. Our doing an action that has consequences, and we don't think about it, means we weren't aware. And I'll bring one example where we see this classic. In Sefer Shmuel, there's a situation where David HaMelech is bringing the Aron, the Holy Ark, to Yerushalayim for the first time, which at that time meant Yer David. Yer David was the original Yerushalayim as far as population. And on the way, it's on a wagon, and it's slipped. There's a couple people taking care of this, and the wagon slips a little, and Uza and Achio. When I taught this to my kids, all three of them, if you ever see them, ask them how they know these two names, because I made up a song for them. The Uza and Achio bumping up and down on their little red wagon. Don't ask. You do what you can, right? Anyways, so Uza sticks out his hand to catch the Aron. Some strikes him dead. What? It's a natural thing. He's afraid that the Aron's going to slip off. He wants to catch it. What's the problem here? And it says even David was upset. So it says that the Aron was nosei nosav. The Aron carried those who carried it, which meant that when the people were carrying it, they weren't carrying it. The Aron was carrying them. The fact that he put his hand out because he was afraid it was going to slip off the wagon meant he was unaware of the kedusha of the moment, and therefore the Hashem took his life. Again, we're talking about people we can't understand the level they were at. It still doesn't sound good, but the idea of lack of awareness for that moment had consequences. We, thank God, don't have consequences like that in our lives, because I wouldn't be here to talk to you. That's right. The day after Bar Mitzvah had been all over. So in any case, on that happy note, and it is 72 minutes, 18 minutes cost you. Sorry. We will end here today. Bezat Hashem, next Thursday will be the last class before Pesach. We'll take a break for a couple of weeks, and we'll continue after Pesach. But I'll see you hopefully before that. Pleasure.